Okay, John here from Magnolia Media. Again, check out our podcast by searching the Magnolia Media Pod or giving to our Patreon at patreon.com/Magnolia Media Network. Ultimately, that's what we want to be. We want to be a network that has reporters in Nashville and Birmingham and Raleigh and Richmond paying attention to what these state legislatures are doing. We're not as worried about Richmond as we are, Nashville, especially Nashville, which has gotten more and more extreme with the MAGA movement, which sort of goes hand in hand with what these people have wanted. We need you, those of you who enjoy our content, to tell a friend and have that friend tell a friend, tell 5 friends. You don't have to listen to the entire episode. Give us a few minutes, mark as read, leave a comment, move on. Or check us out on YouTube. I post some of these videos to YouTube. Although my space is mostly Instagram, social media. That's mostly where you're going to find us. Of course, we're tickled to death about the 34 criminal charges levied against Trump, on which he was found guilty. And that's kind of where we're at. Here's what I wanted to get at a moment ago. When I was on here earlier today and I mentioned the absolute elitism on the left. And what I mean by that is look at what are considered left-leaning outlets. I don't consider them left-leaning outlets. I think they're corporate outlets, and if they're corporate, they're right-wing by nature. And that is, of course, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and a lot of media personalities. Look, Midas Touch is great because they are a news organization, a media outfit that sits at the intersection of law and politics in order to talk about some of the things they talk about, not all of them. One need to be a lawyer. That's fair. So you need a college degree. You don't necessarily need to have gone to Georgetown, Ben, but it helps. It helps. It truly does. It also helps to have access to that kind of capital, just right out of pocket. Again, I mentioned George Hahn. He went to Boston College, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't do him much good. There are there are no liberal elites who didn't go to some sort of premier university. It's unnecessary at this point. You're convincing families that they need to send their children off instead of developing skills, real world skills. You're going to send them off to a university. It's going to cost you or them $250,000, $300,000. They're going to be in debt forever. Their goal in life won't be to buy a house. It will be to pay off their student loans before they die. They'll likely rent most, if not all, of their life. Even someone like myself who come into a little money, it takes what, $500,000 to even get started searching for a house in a place like Tennessee. And this is the last place on earth I don't want to live. So, that's the push and pull. Everybody doesn't have to be an elite. And once upon a time, the New York Times, in particular, used to go out and look for, actively seek those who could just write, or just sell. If you're a salesman, you don't need a bachelor's degree. You need product information, which is something you'll have to give to a college grad anyway. And college grad doesn't come out of college with the ability to just go right out in the field and start selling whatever product. They don't. So let's drop the liberal elitism. Let's if we want to get back to the common man and the common woman, which I think we've done a fairly good job of since electing Joe Biden, then we have to sort of stay away from this, barrage of um, liberal elites. The Don Lemons and Anderson Coopers, the Anderson Cooper in particular, who again is worth $250 million before he puts his slippers on in the morning, much less before he got a job at CNN, because he's a legacy millionaire. Podcasts. You got podcast hosts like Prof G, who I love, Scott Galloway, much love, my man. But a guy worth $250 million who really got no exposure on social media or on podcasts until he had that $250 million tucked away somewhere, or however much it is. Kara Swisher, again, same thing. Until she was a wealthy person, she was just a writer. And the need for one of these prestigious degrees is less important now than possibly ever before. All of the knowledge that you can hold in that brain of yours is nothing compared to what I've got in this phone. This phone I'm using to record this at this very moment is smarter than all of the universities in the world. It has more information in it, or it can seek that information for me if the question is framed in the right way. So why continue to put families in impossible situations? Start preparing children for Ivy League applications when they're in preschool. It's a huge turnoff, especially to the center of the country, which is who we are trying to service in a lot of ways. We're trying to bring them media that pierces through the right-wing bubble in which they live. The Bukowski went to LA City College for 2 years. I went to a local university for 2 years. Of course, the opioid crisis got me, and then one family tragedy after another delayed my education, which I could still go get, but do what with? Go to work for a tech firm? Not at my age, for one, and for two, those jobs are disappearing anyway. So who really cares? I mean, the Patagonia vest recession is well underway. Meta lays off 20% of its employees and their stock goes through the roof. The same thing is going to happen across the board. They will need fewer people, especially in that space. That's what AI is going to do. It's not going to, hurt people at the grocery store any more than, automated checkout already has. It's going to hurt the people who earn between $150,000 and $300,000 a year. Those are the people who are going to get burned. It's just that simple. So be prepared for that, especially if you're a college kid. And by the way, just in my city, we have 3 law schools. 3 law schools. We used to have one, which was the University of Tennessee, and it used to not be as highly thought of as it is today. Now we have 3, producing 70 to 100 attorneys a year over year. So that's 300 lawyers a year. So in a decade, you produce 3,000 attorneys to service a population of about 500,000 people. Maybe 1 million if you go region wide, which you really don't. You kind of service your community or no one at all. We have lawyers more and more who are working out of the back of their cars. We have lawyers who are meeting people at delis because that's their office. That's the space they occupy. So we it would be a great service to both the New York Times and to the general public if they gave people like myself a chance. If they gave people who had learned to write, had learned to speak, had learned to engage others, the opportunity to take up the keyboard, the pen, the microphone, and speak. I think the theory that they somehow need to go to Harvard, which is just producing right-wing psychopaths at this point, or Yale, or Brown, or Princeton, or Cornell, great universities and great institutions, and they're very important, especially for creating doctors, for example, but not necessarily when it comes to creating journalists or people who report on the news. It's just that simple. And I think the further we get from that, the better off we are. That doesn't mean we don't need those people. It just means that everyone who comments on what's going on in the world of politics doesn't need to first have been a speechwriter for Obama, or have, Michelle Obama on speed dial, Kara, or Elon Musk, or Bill Gates, or whomever. It's not a necessity to be good at what you do. Now, of course, we were awful at first. We didn't know what we were doing. We had no idea how to use the software, how to, cut, clip, edit, add, import, export. We didn't know what we were doing, but we've gotten better at it. We're going to keep chipping away at it. And with your help, we're going to get to 10,000 followers here on Instagram. We're going to get to 10,000 on Twitter X, which makes me nauseous, and on Threads. I don't even bother with Facebook anymore. I'm not on TikTok. And we're going to get to that, 1,000 listeners a month at the Magnolia Media Pod. Check it out, the Magnolia Media Podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts.